Okay, hopefully you've watched the first video on Ryan Gould, but now we're into the second one, and we're going to discuss the fall cross country training, starting pretty much when you go back to school. The first question is, how do you handle the team going from summer into school? You know that they're changing their sleeping pattern from the summer into the new school pattern, etc.
Well, I mean, this was not part of your question, but the first thing that happens when school starts is we have a pretty clear delineation between those who were there in the summer and those who are just showing up, right? So we get in pretty quickly, we're getting into creating groups, trying to find training partners who are going to be able to push each other appropriately and allow everybody to kind of meet them where they are and come along to get to this common destination. Going back to school is definitely tough. I think it is an advantage that we're meeting in the mornings in the summer, right around the same time school starts. So there, I don't know, the sleep pattern is changing all that much, but you know, where the kids are starting classes, they're pretty early on, they're getting overloaded with work. So, you know, years ago we stopped, you know, kids used to double in the morning. I'm pretty strict now about them not doing that and getting their sleep. Um, and it's just a lot of individual conversations, right, with the athletes. Are you getting good sleep? Did you eat breakfast? Did you have dinner last night? You know, what time are you studying? When are you getting to bed? How are you taking care of yourself? And being really flexible and just and having eyes on my coach pointed out to me early in my career, like if you just kind of like walk throughout the group when they're warming up, you'll know, is somebody hurting, is somebody tired, and being able to be flexible with our plan of like that individual might need a little bit more rest. But I think checking in and having strong relational bonds also creates a situation where a kid can come to you and say, like, I got a lousy night's sleep, I had 3 tests today, da 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 da, and then we make an adjustment there as necessary. But meeting in the morning in the summer that's actually helpful for us because it's the their daily schedule is not all that different.
Yeah. How does your training change once you start competing?
That's a great question. We have a dual meet schedule. I believe it's important for everybody on the team to compete in those dual meets as much as popular. That's uncommon. I think I'm in the minority there. It's uncommon, but to me, that's important because we're a team. And I think that we should do things together. So that has created a situation where I need to be a more creative coach, right? Because like you'll hear people say, "Oh, we just tempo the dual meets," and probably my biggest pet peeve in coaching training is that interchangeability of tempo and threshold when they don't necessarily mean the same thing. But like, how do you tempo across country? That's incredibly difficult. You're not out on a flat road checking your watch, right? You got hills, you're in a race. So we'll try to, where we can, have our kids who are going out to November not be at 100% in those dual meets. And we'll look at that as a hard day. And how can we have a productive sub maximal effort, right? So we'll look at oftentimes the skill of racing, which I think is under taught and under practiced, particularly now I'm going to go like out of my, above my pay grade, particularly at the collegiate level. I think young college athletes don't race enough and they don't practice the skill of racing. And I think sometimes, particularly in the US, we see that blow up at big competitions. So we'll look at a dual meet and say, we're going to go out really hard the first mile because we have short coaches coming up and that first mile is really hard. So I need you to get out hard, and then you can check back a little bit the first 2 miles, but we need you to be heart pounding, legs burned in the first mile, because on September 30th, that's going to happen to you no matter what. We may have other meets where we say, okay, you're going to cruise together for 2 miles, and then you're going to put the hammer down and bring it home really fast, because you can't win a race if you can't switch gears and finish fast. And then we'll build our training around that. For novice kids, I think you get better at racing by racing. So, we'll let them go out there and just compete really hard in those dual meets. over the course of the season. We're trying to build up their capacity to do a long run. And then besides that, we're doing, the month of September, some type of threshold or aerobic strength, aerobic power. Like we might do a bunch of 300s. Like we're really focused on building up their engine, and letting them become race savvy and learn to race through racing.
Well, how do you, speaking of meets, and you already answered the question about dual meets, how do you pick your meets? Do you have a certain amount of meets you want to run each year, or what is, if you pick a meet, what is the purpose of that?
I think you can have a variety of purposes, right? So like I mentioned, our dual meets, that's where we've always been. We're team before individual, relay before individual event. Cross country is this my favorite season on a personal level. So our dual meets, they're there, and we're going to compete at them to the best of our ability. One meet I'm thinking of as you asked this question is Manhattan. We try, if we think we have a really good shot at the group meet or at the meet of champions, we go to Manhattan, because again, I think the skill of racing is something that's under practiced and under taught, as I said. And every year I have a young group get to the meet of champions. We spend weeks leading up to it. Like, listen, it's going to be over like that. Everybody's going to be screaming the entire way. You're going to be running the race of your life, and you're going to be in 50th place. And then when you get done, you're not going to remember any of it. We prepare and prepare and prepare, and we do our race simulation, and we kind of like talk through what to expect. And then they shoot the gun. The young guys go through the meet of champs afterwards and say, how does it go? And they go, I don't remember. So I don't think there's any real preparation for the meet of champions besides a previous meet of champs. But the closest thing I found is Manhattan.
You got the Manhattan Invitational. You pick any other meets for any other purpose?
Courses, courses are probably the primary thing that I'm looking at. Championship courses. So our sectional is Thompson, like yours is. So we make sure we get to Thompson to practice a bit, but to race on as well. We short coaches to make sure that we get to race at Holmdel as well. The other thing that's great about Manhattan is you're going out of state. There's a bunch of medals. It's got that really big atmosphere about it. Short coaches, that's the same thing. So, some meets you do because you have to, some meets you're doing to prepare for the big ones at the end. And ultimately, right, you got teenage kids doing a sport, so it's got to be fun too, right? You want to have memorable, fun meets like what you do at 6. We've never been there because it doesn't really work for our schedule, but I've always heard amazing things about it. So I think if you're doing those 3 things, then you probably got a pretty good schedule set up.
Yeah. Do you have a go-to workout in the fall, and why do you do it?
We do a couple different what we call race rehearsals. I have a lot of students who are in performing arts, whether it's music or theater. So I started very purposefully using the word rehearsal, where we are trying to model the race that's coming up. Kurt Waiton told me one, probably 15 years ago now, I used to call the bowl beater, and we call ours the Holmdel hack. We got a lot of computer science people too. So rehearsal and hacks and that kind of language makes a lot of sense to the athletes. And so we're in Plainsboro, right? There's not a hill in sight anywhere. So we'll do different variations of it. Like a very simple version of it would be, we have a gradual incline, and we'll run 400 meters up that hill as fast as possible to get their legs feeling heavy. Then we'll do 2K at like threshold or slightly off 5K pace. Then we'll come back and we'll do that hill again. And again, it's not big like the bowl, so we got to go a little bit longer and higher effort, again, to spike their heart rate, to get their legs heavy. We'll go back and do the threshold piece again, which is or even 10K pace. So a little bit off of 5K pace. It's that controlled hard running. It's not conversational. But it's not race pace either. It's somewhere in the gray area there. And then they'll come back for the last piece, where we'll try to set them up at the top of the hill and come 400 meters downhill. It's 5,200 meters. If you keep the rest short, it sums up to a time that then, so there's 2 things happening. One, they're getting prepared for the course. And 2, they're getting this number at the end that looks pretty close to what they could run in a race. And that helps with goal setting as well. So those rehearsal workouts are really great for Mark Wetmore used to say to his guys all the time, make the movie in your mind, right? Like visualizing the race, but not visualizing the race like lying in your bed or sitting on your couch, visualizing the race in this chaotic, uncomfortable state. Besides that, I think strength is everything in cross country. 5 by a mile with a minute rest. If that was the only workout, if we could only do one workout forever, that would be the one for us. So get nice and strong in whatever way the kid's able to, right? So like again in the summer, training to train, and then come October, we're training to race. Mid-September now that our season's a little bit shorter, and just rehearsing what does Holmdel Park look like, what does Thompson Park look like, what does whatever course look like, and how do you race it well.
All right, last question. Do you do anything different when peaking? You back off intensity, back off mileage, cut your long run short or off, or do you do anything different?
I'm still trying to, at 20 years in, I'm still trying to figure out that long run piece. Like, how does that, I've had guys who like the Roses, John Squarey, like they had to do that long run all the way to the end or they would just feel sluggish. Other kids, we needed to cut back on that earlier. Again, I mentioned Kurt Wayton, we're working in the same building. He's a fantastic coach. He once made the analogy of think about at the end of the summer when you've been running just a lot of mileage and not a lot of intensity, and you just feel like you're just primed and ready. And he told me that years ago as a advice to like don't cut back the mileage too much. A lot of times if you cut back the mileage too much, kids will start saying, I feel tired, I feel sluggish, my legs feel heavy, right? You're not priming that aerobic system. We do cut back on the intensity, at least the volume of intensity. So we're not going to run 2400s or 810 by 1,000, right? We're not going to go way over race distance at that point in the season. We're going to do that rehearsal. It's going to be 4,800 to 5,400 meters. Very short rests. A guy I work with at Hapro, his name's Craig Kipe, great coach. He was my sister's coach as well. He talked about interval training, thinking about like somebody who's making a quilt. And you have these patches and they're really far apart and you thread them and you're just pulling the thread tighter to get the pieces together. So the hard workouts are very purposeful. They're not particularly long. They're spaced out more in between, right? Instead of going hard, easy, it might be hard, easy, 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 hard. And I do try to interject a little bit of that threshold pace or even like the aerobic threshold, like the marathon pace, so that the mileage is quick enough that like their aerobic system is staying pretty sharp.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Very similar some of the things to me, but that's okay. You do have our other differences, which is excellent. So thank you.
All right. Thank you.